Hi, I'm Monah.
Hi, I'm Nushy Rose.
And I'm Sophie, and I want to welcome you to episode 80 of Ethnically Speaking, the show where we discuss everything affecting the UK's highly melanated communities, from current affairs to pop culture and everything in between. Now, we always keep it 100, and today we're talking about when your profession gets all up in your personal business. Amazon recently announced that they won't be requiring actual or prospective employees who don't operate vehicles to undergo mandatory marijuana drug tests. Now, while this signals a departure and a major shift from workplace attitudes towards recreational drugs, it is not the only information that employers are interested in. Social media is often the one-stop shop for job candidates, or should I say employers who want to know more about their job candidates by looking at their posts to see if there's anything that they should be wary of, which makes me want to know, what personal information should employers know before or after we're hired? Are there details of our personal life that are relevant to our professional life, or are companies overstepping the mark?
So, I feel very conflicted on this one because to me, like, the workplace is like another home. And so I love sharing all of I talk a lot. I like to know about people's lives if they're obviously willing to discuss them. I like to know about their relationships, their dating stories, like who they live with, like what drama's happening, and vice versa. Like, I really like coming into a workplace where there's that kind of environment where you feel comfortable enough to discuss what's going on in your actual life. On the other hand, I do think that doesn't come, like, when that actually is special and actually, meaningful is when you're already in that workplace and you've met the people and you've created some kind of bond with your colleagues, with your employer. Like, you shouldn't go to your job interview and start asking people, if they say, do you have any questions, asking them about their love lives, obviously. But I do think there is kind of that thing, once you're in a job, it's obviously different. But with the prospective employees, I kind of feel like we all do it ourselves. Like, most people are curious. They enjoy stalking. Like, you stalk random people that you've just met at a party. You stalk your ex's new girlfriend. We stalk all the time. And that's just a natural part of growing up with social media and using social media and not having enough to do sometimes. And so I kind of think that people should know by now how to use social media wisely. And more importantly, I think the key thing here is how to use social media as an opportunity to present your best self to future employers. I don't think most people, I'm sure, will know, like, don't post a million photos of yourself sort of half naked, dancing around a fire, clutching a bottle of Jack Daniels. I feel like, you can instead present, an exercise in personal branding, the type of person you think you would want to hire in whatever your field is. And so I do think that actually, rather than seeing employers stalking us as something to be afraid of, it can actually be sort of twisted around and we can look at it as an opportunity instead.
I feel like I have a bone to pick with some of these employers, if not all of them. For me, the process starts from before you even get into the interview. This is just me speaking on my beliefs and stuff. I do not feel that answering any of the questions of my ethnicity, my sexual orientation, or the age bracket that I come underneath affects my ability to do the job in any way, shape, or form. Sorry, I forgot religion as well. Don't ask me questions like that. They get me really, really upset. I used to answer them before because I kind of felt like it was mandatory. And I felt like if I didn't answer those questions, then maybe I could be shooting myself in the foot. And now I have no problem saying it directly to the employer's face. I mean, I doubt that somebody would ask. I mean, no, you get it. I was going to say, I doubt that somebody would ask me what your ethnicity is, but no, you do get it. And I mean, if they're going, what they like to do is, I'm talking about this when I fill out a form online, but I have also had it in person as well. So I have had people stand there with their clipboard, and I get that it's just the question. So it's not necessarily them, but still, I've been in circumstances where I've been like, well, why do you need to know that? And it does get a bit awkward, but I feel like, no, I'm going to stand my ground because, as I've said, I don't actually know how this seems to benefit me in any way, shape, or form. And all that malarkey about how they like to use it for percentages and see how diverse the workforce is, I don't believe it. I'm not going to lie to you. I really don't believe it. So no, I don't feel like they need to know that type of information. Going off the stalking, I find it a difficult one because I understand the benefits for it, but I also think it's unfair to the individual because I'm somebody who believes that you weren't put on this earth just to work. Like before you are anything, you are you. Before you're a mum, you are who you are. Before you're a partner, before you're a nurse or whatever your occupation is, you are you. And to be constricted by your job to the point where it affects how you navigate the world outside in your personal or leisure activities, I do find that a problem. And I think that we've all seen people who have gone on shows, Celebrity Big Brother, or just normal Big Brother, Love Island, whatever the case may be, where they've been seriously impacted because of that in their personal life. And I do understand that, someone say, oh, well, you know what you signed up for. I mean, just because I said that I'm going to be, I don't know, a firefighter, does that mean that I'm putting out fires 24/7 of my life the whole way through? No, I doubt it. And I'm speaking metaphorically here. I'm not talking about physical fires. I think that it does constrict people to the point where it is unhealthy. And I don't actually think that is quite fair. I mean, I know that in Japan, if I'm correct, there seems to be this workaholic sort of aura where you need to be working all the time and you need to be showing that you're working all the time in every avenue of your life. And it puts an immense amount of pressure on people to the point where people commit suicide. I think that's very unhealthy. So I'm a little bit wishy-washy as to how I feel about the stalking from companies, but I'll let someone else talk. Sophie, what are you thinking?
I think it's really interesting the stuff you said about the equal opportunities information, like on job applications. I'm always happy to fill that in, and I never really thought about it. But now that I work in the job that I currently work in, which is in higher education, I am one of the people who needs access to those statistics in order to do my job. So it enables us to be able to see how diverse our workplace is and to see areas where we need to work on various different groups. Like, so, like, do we have a higher percentage of people who are young? Then maybe we're showing bias to people who are older. What can we do to make sure that we're getting more of a cross reference? The same with gender, sexual orientation and race. So I can see both sides of it. I can see why people don't want to share, but I can also see where it actually makes it more difficult for us when people decide that they don't want to fill it in, because we're unable then to build a case and make a case as for why we probably need to do this sort of project or that sort of project in order to bring in more people from a protected characteristic who aren't properly represented within our organization. In terms of workplaces, man, I use pseudonyms, different names online. I am not here for people seeing what it is that I'm doing online in my workplace. And my workplaces have always been like, we weren't able to find you online. I'm like, that's exactly right, because I'm not here for that. And it's not even because I'm posting anything bogus, but I feel like there should be a line. And my friend has gone so far as to say in her new job, she was like, I'm not even telling anyone I'm on social media. Because like, in your workplace and people will be like, oh, what's your social media? People don't really ask me that at work. And maybe it's because now we're working virtually. So you're not in those day-to-day kind of situations where you're going to ask. But yeah, I just feel like there's probably not anything that you're really going to find out about me online. But I'll come back to some other scenarios later on.
I find one of this scenario happened that it really rubbed me up the wrong way. I called in sick to work because I was sick. And I look after my niece and my nephew, right? And I don't know what was going on. Maybe I was taking my nephew to nursery or whatnot. And he just did something that was so cute and it warmed my heart. And I thought, I have to show this. And I did. And I remember thinking in my head, I wonder if I'm going to get backlash for this. And lo and behold, yes, I did. When I came into work the next day, somebody made a very shady comment. And they made a comment to say, like, they didn't say this directly, but this is what they implied. You were too sick to come into work, but you weren't too sick to Snapchat or Instagram your nephew. And I thought, where the hell do those two worlds coincide? First of all, you have to resume as much daily activities when children are involved as much as possible. It's not because I'm sick, he's now going to miss a day off school. That's not how it works. And just because you've seen me, I never said I died. I never said I died and then I resurrected and came back to work. I said I'm not coming into work today for whatever the reasons are, ill, personal issues, whatever. the fact that you get to jump on your high horse and judge someone else, it's like, should I be in bed with a thermometer hanging out of my mouth and like, I don't know, an ice pack on my head to make you believe that I'm ill? No, that's none of your business. So that annoys me in a sense where people can use it to spy, because we know all the time things can get misconstrued. And all it takes is one comment to go around the workplace of, oh, well, I saw this and I saw that. And all of a sudden now you've got a stigma on your back that you don't really like to do your job. So that really annoyed me. So I just had to share that. I don't even know if that goes with the fit, but that really annoyed me.
You know, I think this is like slightly different, but I think there's also this thing where like the more an employer knows about you, and so I guess previously I was talking more about colleagues rather than bosses, but I guess the more like your actual employer knows about you, the more power they almost have over you, or the more like the less power you feel. Because, you know, there's all this stuff about as people have started to work from home more and people have seen their bosses and colleagues have seen inside their houses. And for a lot of people, you know, like they might be living in the most amazing circumstances, or they might be living with their parents, or for whatever reason, it's not something you necessarily want every single person you work with to see because they judge you. And so I guess there's this other element, which is that it reinforces or widens the kind of disparity in the agency dynamic between the employer and the employee as well. Because presumably like the employee is going to be in worse living situation than the employer, in terms of working from home as the example, but in general as well. The more they know about you, the more they can kind of hold over you. And I guess in that sense, it's not, you know, I'm somebody who's terrible at being professional and terrible at being corporate, and that's kind of why I left that world. But I guess in one way, like the good thing about it is that there are always those distinctions. There are always conversations you have which will be purely about work, and things that are more personal, you just can't discuss them. It would be like, you know, people are very shocked if you would mention something, you know, even for your weekend, you're meant to just say like, it was great. And so I guess it is something to be said about why that culture exists, and actually how it almost protects the employee from that kind of invasive energy from above.
Did both of you work during the pandemic?
I was on furlough for a while, so a little bit of it.
Okay, so I worked from home, and they said that, so in the beginning it was fine. You could work from home and do what you need to do. Then they slowly started to say that they'd like everybody to turn their webcams on. Then it became mandatory that you had to turn your webcam on. I found that a bit invasive, because at the end of the day, being in a pandemic, nobody could prepare for working from home in the manners that we did. Now, going off what Nushy said about the employer being in a different circumstance compared to the employees, I did find it invasive to be told that I had to have my camera on, especially considering the fact that people come from all different walks of life. Imagine if you was working and schools were closed, nurseries were closed. Imagine if you had your children with you and it was a certain thing where you physically could not work without having the dog by your side, the child hanging off your boob, whatever the circumstances might be, right? To be told by my employer, this is previous, by the way, to be told by my previous employer that I had to have my webcam on. I never invited you into my home. Do you know what I mean? I never invited you to see me in these sorts of circumstances. And if I can carry out my work and there's no reason as to why my webcam needed to be on, as if there's no personal issue with how I'm conducting my work or my duties aren't being fulfilled, I did feel it a bit invasive to be told that I had to be on webcam in the privacy of my own home. I didn't like that. I felt that quite invasive.
I never really had that issue because I was working from home since before the pandemic. So I had already set up a space in my house to be an office and made it very specific to what was going to be seen on camera. So the room wasn't like a personal invasion as it has been for so many people who were suddenly thrust into having to work from home, like some people overnight. But I can understand how that can be really, really awkward. But in terms of people spying on your social media, I don't really get it so much from work, more so from the fact that my husband is the pastor. So some of the people at his churches will spy on my social media and want to see if I'm dressing as they would expect, or, you know, have these conceptions about what they think I should look like or what I should dress like. So I do kind of have that sort of pressure. and I am probably known as the out there wife. I don't even know. Because I guess I'm very unapologetic about the way that I dress and the way that I look. So I know some people have an issue with that, and it can affect his career and the places that they want to put him. So in being with me, he has really had to accept that that's my wife, that's who she is. You know, if people have an issue, well, you know, I signed up for her. So it's not only you who your profiles can affect, sometimes they can affect the people in your life as well.
Yeah, and it just makes me sad because as much as, like I said, there's been times where it's been used for good, like exposing inappropriate activities when you're in a position of like care or a certain level of duty, then yeah, 100%, like I think it's good. But then at the same time, when it comes to the fact of almost fear mongering people and having them act in a particular way, I mean, your social media platform is an expression of you. And like I said earlier on, before you are your occupation and whatever other titles the world throws at you, you are yourself. And you have a duty to be true to yourself. And as long as you're able to exercise that in the most appropriate way possible. But I mean, it's subjective, because if someone looks, for example, Sophie's example, if somebody looks at your profile with shady eyes and their intention is to catch you out, their intention is to be like, oh, well, let's see what the pastor's wife is doing because on Thursday her top was very flamboyant and I feel like that represents this. I need to get more receipts for my, judge, jury, executor. It's like, well, then you're never going to win anyway. So it's really annoying to find a way as to how you can do the best for yourself. And it does tie into putting people under enormous amounts of pressures, forcing them to conform to certain stereotypes or ideologies. Because of the pressure, people being a bit more subjected to mental health issues. But before I get carried away, I wanted to kind of wheel it back in and say the fact that Amazon announced that they will no longer be requiring, the drug testing for people using the vehicles. I can't say as beautifully as Sophie did it. The discrepancies with that is that Amazon is like the founder is American, right? And I asked that like we don't know. America is the one who, like, weed is legal now, so they don't have to worry about weed and stuff. The UK, we're not on the same level, but we have Amazon out here. So I feel like that discrepancy isn't actually really fair because they're allowed to use weed over there, which is I know they haven't specified the drug, but when I think of drug, that's the first one that comes into my mind. So if they're allowed to use weed in America and that's not really a problem, surely that shouldn't be the same for the UK.
Yeah, I think it really depends. And I wonder, like, I hear what you're saying. Is it going to be different, or are they going to apply these laws to every country where they're currently operating? I think that's what you're asking. But yeah. I think in America, it'll be very interesting to see if Amazon is going to start stocking marijuana now, like in the near future. I honestly think they're starting to set it up that in couple of years, we're going to start seeing get your verified best weed in, on Amazon, because it is now a viable business. People can manufacture and sell. And I feel like that's a major market that they're not going to want to miss out on. So I think this whole thing is a ploy to start drip feeding this. We're okay with weed. We fight for the laws that are going to make it legal.
Yeah,
get your best deal here on Amazon.
That's a very, very interesting point. And the thing that really rubs me up about that is, again, I mean, we already know that they're not for the people, but I find that so annoying because there was a time before when people were able to use, and I'm not no doctor here, I have to put it out there, I don't know everything I'm saying, but I'm pretty sure that people were talking about taking certain strains out of weed and using like the oil for like medicinal uses and helping people with like excruciating pain. And that was very hard to get your hands on. It was illegal. It was all these things. And now the fact that because it's been passed as legal, and then these companies that are already churning over billions just want to get their hands in these pots. Like, okay, well, let's see how you're going to, because what we're saying is hypothetical. Let's see how you're going to be able to bridge gaps with, like, let's say, medical institutions, to see how you're going to make it easier for patients who want to be able to use it for pain relief. I don't think you're going to be as quick, are you? So that just grinds my gears in that sense. So I'm just like, everything comes down to money. It's not really about what helps the large population. But yeah, I'm with you on that theory, Sophie. I think that's exactly. I don't know why I didn't think of that earlier. As soon as you said it, I was like, that makes sense.
It's funny as well because in America, even though they're legalizing weed, there are people, I think like Miley Cyrus and her dad, or Miley Cyrus's dad, Billy Ray Cyrus, is a manufacturer for weed in his state. So it's not every state, but in certain states. And he posted pictures of like the weed he's growing, and people saying, there is so much like racism in this, because were we celebrating it when it was black people on the street doing it, or other people, ethnic minorities, growing weed and selling weed? Was it as celebrated? Whereas now it seemed like, oh yeah, get involved in it. It's big booming business and all of these things. And yeah, it's very interesting for me.
Absolutely. It's just looking at the face that fits the best in order to push this forward. Because I'm pretty sure I saw a commercial about a mum. I'm not even kidding you, where she was doing yoga, and it said that in order to help her with her childcare stresses, she takes a puff of weed. And people were in uproar saying, "Oh, that's funny that this white lady who is from, a higher class family can smoke weed and chill out and be seen as like the cool mom. But if somebody else was to do it, let's be more specific. If a black mom was supposed to do it now, she'd be seen as like unkept, ghetto, in the hood, not able to look after her child." So it's funny how our responses to drug uses changes depending on the face who is pushing this forward for us as in them.
I think also as well, when we talk about how far can a company go in terms of the personal information that they want. I remember when I worked at River Island years ago. It was when I was at university, and I really wanted to work in retail. Because I wanted the discount, because I love clothes. I'm like, I just wanted a discount. So I'd only apply to shops that I really wanted a discount in, and I got a job at River Island for the Christmas period. It was awful. Like I would never work in retail again after that. I never did. I was like, it's just mind numbing. I just could not take it. But if it's your thing, it's your thing. For me, it just didn't work. But one day, one of the girls was found out to be stealing. Well, she was getting her friends to steal. So her friends would come into the shop and buy a leather jacket, and then she would charge them like £20. She'd charge them for like the price of a piece of jewelry, and then give them a leather jacket in return. They found out, and then they had this whole big thing where they like got her arrested within the store on the shift, and then had her walk down Oxford Circus with like handcuffs. But after that, they really started to violate people, in my opinion, people's personal space, personal privacy. And I think a lot of the staff were young, so I don't even think majority of us even knew what our rights were. But then they started doing searches of everybody before they would leave the store. Now, they would close 1 hour. You would be allowed to leave 1 hour after the shop closed, because you had to tidy up the shop and the racks and all of that. And they would literally body search you. And then they would look into like your bags, open your bags. If you had a headscarf on for like religious reasons, you'd have to undo it and take it down so that they could see that you didn't have anything stored in it. And I remember just being like, this is just really, really invasive. And I know they were trying to make a point about we're going to take it seriously, but sometimes I think one person can spoil it for everybody else. Because I remember just how uncomfortable I felt. I remember one time I was on my period, and they were like, we need to search your bag. And I was just like, I've got sanitary towels in there. Do I have to open it in front of everybody? And they're like, okay, fine. You can give me a quick check. I was like, so yeah, I think sometimes companies can kind of get away with a lot, especially if the demand is high for the organization. And because it was an Oxford Circus, they were like inundated with CVs like every single day. So it wasn't really it wasn't a thing. Like the turnover, I would assume, was quite high, but they were fine with that. But I think that I'd be very uncomfortable working for somewhere if I knew beforehand that they had mandatory drug testing. And it's not because I take drugs, but I'm just like, what does that have to do with my role? If I can do my role and I turn up and do it competently, you have no reason to know really what's kind of substances in my body unless it gets to the point of addiction.
Ooh, I feel like that last comment's a little bit political, only because I feel like, imagine if, and again, this is why I say everything is so subjective. Imagine if you worked in a profession where you had to take care, I don't know, of children. Even if you were able to do your job competently, I just feel like I would feel some type of way, the person looking after my child being under the influence of drugs. And some people say that they can work amazingly when they are on drugs. And we're being very kind here. I feel like we're being very like PG-13, because when we say drugs, I still keep getting weed in my head. we haven't even touched the cocaine and all of that. We haven't
crystal
even
meth.
we haven't even jumped into it as much as you can jump into it. So I think, and once you get in, it all gets a bit niggly. One kind of leads into the other, but let's not get into episode of skins. So I would feel a bit uncomfortable if somebody who was supposed to be looking after my child, or my grandmother, if they were a carer, someone who's in a position where they're looking after vulnerable people, if you are under the influence of drugs, I just think it gets a bit techy. So it probably does come down to the duties that you uphold in your job and the job title. But a question that I did want to ask is, what type of information then do you think is too personal, and how they obtain it? So let's say if they just stumbled across information on your LinkedIn page, or if they were intentionally doing some snooping on Instagram, or if they had like a fake account that snooped with that. Because if you have them on Instagram, then I kind of feel like you're aware that there's eyes watching you. But if they had like fake accounts, which some of my friends who have worked for fashion PR have told me that there is bopping about, if they've had fake accounts and they've been spying on you a little bit, what type of methods do you feel uncomfortable with? And how far is, what type of personal information would you say is too far and off limits for them to obtain?
Like, I feel with social media, I am happy for any future employer to find me on any platform. Like, there's nothing on any of my accounts that is suspicious or might kind of evoke some kind of negative reaction, because I don't put anything on there that that I think will elicit that kind of reaction. Everything I wish to hide, I don't put online.
Nushy, is this even going back to young Nushy? Young Nushy, Facebook Nushy, back in the day Nushy. There's absolutely nothing that could come back and you'd be like, oh.
You know what? Yeah, okay. There's one article that plagues me. There's an article I wrote about 7 years ago for the Spectator about celibacy. And it was about, the article's called "Why Do All My Boyfriends Turn Gay?" And I feel like I have been to a lot of interviews where people have, or even started jobs where people have raised this. And in this thing, I was pretty young, I was 24. I found it hilarious that everyone I dated came out the closet. Obviously now I'm not so funny as I've aged a little, but like things like that, I can't ask the Spectator to take that down. There's other things as well online, like a couple of other articles for various people that I feel some kind of awkwardness about, not necessarily because they're super personal, but because the things I was revealing then, I guess, things that are funny when you're young obviously aren't the same when you're older. And if you're publishing on a platform that you don't own, so like obviously I own the content, well, Facebook owns it, but say on Facebook, I can remove it. So even if it's still out there somewhere, people can't access it if they look me up. But there are some things that I would wish, like, that I don't have any right to take down, that I am embarrassed about. But about 2 years ago, I actually combed through a lot of different platforms, and things that I thought were, there was nothing on there that was particularly offensive or anything, but there was stuff like, me as like a morbidly obese 15-year-old, with like drinking a bottle of wine or whatever it might be, like things like that. I was like, you know what, like, no one's going to look at this and think, I don't think anyone's going to think badly of me. They'll think, okay, she's just a normal kid. But I would still prefer people not to see that stuff. So I did take things down. But apart from that, I really don't think there's like anything else that I'm ashamed of. Like a lot of the stuff, I think, from when I was a teenager anyway, was anonymous. So like LiveJournal, for example, I kept a LiveJournal from the ages of 12 to 18. And there's no connection to my name. There's nothing like on there that would suggest it was me. And so I think that because really personalized social media sites like Facebook didn't exist until I was really like 17, or like I wasn't really using them in the same way until I was older. And by that time, there was all this stuff, there was lots of fear mongering about how to use social media and so on and so on and so on. So I was very aware of all those things because they were much bigger issues back then, because everyone lived in fear of how it might come back. Now we kind of see and now we're experiencing now, obviously, with like things like cancel culture and things. But obviously, the younger generation or Gen Z are a bit more clued up on how to use it, and they're all using it to express themselves in ways that I don't think we were necessarily. Like, you know, it's much more thoughtful, it's much more bespoke and kind of high, in my view, like.
Girl, what Gen Z are you talking about? Bespoke.
I think so. I know, but I feel like but last time as well, I was saying about like the personal branding thing. You know what I mean? I think they're much better at it than we were, because that didn't really exist in the same way in social media spaces. So yeah, that was a very long-winded way of making my point. But yeah, that's what I think.
I mean, I think for me, I'm not happy for them to know anything that's not on the application form. And they can look at my social media, because there's not going to be anything up there that is going to be upsetting for anyone. My employees won't have an issue, but that's not the stuff I've shared with you. What's on the application form you can have. Everything else is really off limits, and that's why I go by pseudonyms. So that's the end of our conversation today. Thanks for watching and listening to Ethnically Speaking, but help us to keep the conversation going. We want to know, what personal information do you think that you would want your employer to know about you before you're being hired? Let us know your answers down below in the comments. And if you want a summary of everything we've talked about today, head on over to unitedmelaningroup.com/ES080. The link will be in the description. If you've been watching us on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, give us a thumbs up, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single thing. Ethnically Speaking will be back on Friday, but until then, wear your mask, wash your hands, keep your distance, and stay safe.